Welcome to this World Circular Economy Forum event. This session is all about how companies can measure their circular economy performance. First up, we're going to hear about the Foundation's own circular economy measurement tool, Circulytics. We're going to learn how the tool works and what's changed since it was first born 3 years ago. We will then explore why measuring circular economy can help companies get ahead of the game in terms of upcoming policy developments. And then we're going to hear from companies that have been using the tool. Since we've just launched the latest update of Circulytics, we're also eager to tell you about what's changed. We hope to have time to answer your questions at the end of the session, so throughout this webinar you can put your questions in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. My name is Ellen MacArthur. I'm part of the team here at the Foundation, and I'm joined by my colleague Julia Hunt, who is the project manager of Circulytics. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you. It's great to be in the studio with you today.
Thanks for being here. So I have an important question for you. What is Circulytics?
Great question. So Circulytics is a company-level measurement tool that allows a company to assess their circular economy performance. And it has been developed when we first started around 2-3 years ago. Companies from the Foundation's network approached us asking for such a tool because at the time that didn't exist. And so Circulytics is the result of what we developed with over 30 companies from our network. And it is applicable to companies of every size, no matter what the industry is, and also no matter what the complexity of the company is. Most importantly, or very importantly, it's a free tool, so any company can sign up for a free account.
Okay. And if I was a business leader, why would you tell me to use Circulytics? What's the value in the tool?
Circulytics is the most comprehensive circular economy measurement tool out there. And that's the case because it looks at the entire operations of the company, also looking at, for example, the enabling conditions that enable a company to make the transition to circularity. And we know that circular economy creates better growth in ways that also benefits the environment and society. Companies today are recognizing that. They're starting to implement circular economy actions to help them create long-term economic growth and also resilience, while they're also tackling global issues like climate change and pollution. But in order to make the right strategic decisions, companies really need to know how they're performing and they need the right data. And that's where Circulytics comes in. It can highlight the strengths of the company and it can highlight areas for improvement. And by providing these insights, Circulytics essentially helps them become more circular.
Right, so if the goal is to become more circular, how does measuring that help you to get there?
So if you just try and imagine that from a company's perspective, you're the person in the company that is trying to make the company more circular, that's your job. It's always difficult to pinpoint where to start, or even if your company has started, then how do you make progress? And Circulytics is really vital for those companies that are serious about the transition to a circular economy, because we can't properly implement a circular economy until we can measure it. And to have an impact as a company, you then need to know how you're performing. So Circulytics really enables you to measure your performance and thereby unlock the potential economic benefits and also to work towards your sustainability goals because they're closely linked. So measuring something objectively might uncover some blind spots that the company hadn't thought about before. And then once you've done Circulytics once, it allows you to track progress year on year. So once you've got your Circulytics result, you can then, if you choose to disclose it or share it, you can engage your value chain, for example, which will allow you to take the environment that you're really working in, to take those on the journey with you. And it can also, for example, be a valuable tool to engage your investors who are increasingly allocating resources towards circular economy activity.
Right, so it sounds like there's lots of different levers that Circulytics can sort of activate, but how does it work? Like, what does it really measure?
Basically, Circulytics is divided into two categories. So we have, on the top half, we have the enablers. They look at the enabling conditions that need to be in place in the company to make that transition. And then the second category, the outcomes, are those that are the more tangible results, like material flows, And the bottom half, so the outcomes category, gets tailored to the type of company that is doing the assessment. So within each of those categories, Circulytics asks a number of questions on a set of themes. For example, we have the strategy and planning, we look at the material flows, but also we go beyond that and we look at innovation, we look at how the company interacts with their external stakeholders and so on. So these themes have been chosen to really cover those aspects that companies should be looking into to get a holistic picture of their circular economy performance.
Okay, so we don't have much more time here to let Julia really go further into the details. But if you would like to know more, you can head to our website, which is at circulytics.com. And there you can find a full list of the indicators that are included in Circulytics, as well as a method introduction. So I do have another question for you, Julia. What does this really look like for a reporter who's going through that process?
So, and as I mentioned, any company can sign up for a free account on our website. And then once we've processed that application, we will send out an email with the login details to the online survey where the data needs to be submitted. And then the Circulytics model processes that data and creates a result. And that looks like this scorecard. So it's a one-page scorecard that features the overall score at the top right and then going counterclockwise. So there's also a score history when the company has completed the Circulytics assessment more than once in a row. You can see how you're progressing. There's also a score breakdown by theme. So for each of the themes, the company can see perhaps where their strengths are or where they need to improve. And then at the bottom of the scorecard, we have the benchmark. So we will be providing an industry benchmark once we have enough data in an industry to ensure that the benchmark is anonymized. We will provide a benchmark for that industry and the company can really compare against their peers' results on average. There will be some valuable links and resources, for example, our case study library or the procurement tool that the foundation has developed. And for companies that are large, so with an annual revenue over $1 billion, or for companies within the foundation's network, we will also be providing an analyst commentary that really draws out the strengths and areas for improvement again, and also pulls out 3 key action points that we believe the company should be doing to really enhance their score for the next time.
Mm-hmm. A lot packed into an A4 then. So you mentioned that the tool was created to kind of address a demand from our network. How has the uptake of the tool been since it was launched?
Yeah, we've seen great consistent uptake of the tool. So the numbers of accounts that we created since the original launch in February 2020, we see that during the first reporting cycle, we had just over 600 accounts created, and that has more than doubled in the past 12 months. So we're now near 1,300 accounts. And we also have a chart on the split of the geographies. So we're pleased to see that Circulytics is being picked up across all the continents, and we actually have created accounts for companies in 82 different countries across all of those continents. And while we perhaps see the majorities of companies sit in Europe, where the foundation originated, we're very pleased to see that the global uptake is really happening, and we're working towards that as well. Then we have a chart on the completions in the past 12 months. So whereas previously we looked at the number of accounts created, this is now the actual submissions that we saw come through in the last 12 months. Split by annual revenue, we're very pleased to see that Circulytics gets taken up by all sizes of companies. So we see some SMEs completing the tool, but we also see very big companies with annual revenues over 1 billion, over 10 billion even, completing the tool. So about 30% have annual revenues over $1 billion. And that really shows how Circulytics is applicable to all sizes of companies and can help them in their transition. Then we have another chart that shows the split by industry. So these are also the submissions that we've seen in the past 12 months. And again, we see that Circulytics is really helping all types of companies do their transition to a circular economy, where we have a large part with consumer products taking the tool. we also see the very different industry, the service industry, pick up the tool and gaining value from that as well. So we have consumer products, services, but also, for example, the energy sector, financial institutions. They've all completed Circulytics and it works for them. So it shows how Circulytics caters to a very diverse audience.
Thank you, Julia. It's encouraging to hear then that the tool is really being used by companies all over the world. So now that we understand a little bit more about how the tool works, we're going to turn to another question that you might have, which is why does this all matter? So next up, we have a conversation from some of our colleagues, Jarkko Havas, who is the lead of the Insights and Analysis team here at the Foundation, and Mikkel de Smet, who is the lead of the Finance Initiative. And we're going to hear about how companies can get ahead of upcoming policy changes by using measurement tools like Circulytics.
Hi, Mikkel. Thanks for taking the time to be part of the webinar today. How are you doing?
Hi, Jarkko. Doing well, thanks. And very much looking forward to the session today.
Great. So here we are talking about Circulytics and measuring circular economy performance. We say that Circulytics is a great way to get ahead of the game in terms of measuring this performance before it becomes mandatory to some extent on circular economy as well in the EU and probably outside of EU as well. So let's take a step back and talk about why that is and start with the EU taxonomy. You've been working closely on that. What is it? What is the EU taxonomy?
Yes, great question. First things first. The EU taxonomy is a classification system. Basically, it's a list of economic activities that then is linked through technical screening criteria with their environmental performance. And it aims to create a common language, a language that can be used by corporates, investors, governments to instill trust in the market about that environmental performance and also protect against greenwashing.
Okay. And why should we care about all of that?
Well, as you already hinted at, it's going to be mandatory, or at least disclosure on taxonomy alignment. So your share of activities that actually comply with the taxonomy, that disclosure is going to be mandatory. And really, there are three types of stakeholders that will be affected. First of all, we've got large companies, those that are already obliged to report on non-financial performance in line with the non-financial reporting directive. Those companies will have to disclose their taxonomy alignment for revenues, OPEX and CAPEX. So that's one category. Second one is financial market participants, banks, investors. They also will have to disclose in line with the taxonomy. And thirdly, it's about the EU and member states when they develop, for example, eco-labels for financial products. And here a great example is the EU Green Bond Standard, which is relying on the EU taxonomy. So yeah, we definitely should be caring. It's coming our way. And it's going to have a huge impact on non-financial disclosure.
Okay. And with Circulytics, we mostly measure company performance. We do apply it to other contexts as well, to non-profits and so on. But as we're mostly looking at companies, how many companies will all of this taxonomy and the non-financial reporting affect in EU?
Yes, I think for that question, it's good to take a step back, not only at the EU taxonomy, but also at the recently published Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which basically is the revision of the non-financial reporting directive. And stick with me in terms of the acronym, so that's the CSRD. In that CSRD, there is a reference to what is called the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, which still have to be developed. And they focus on 6 environmental topics, and those are, well, not coincidentally, the same as these 6 environmental objectives which we find in the EU taxonomy. Those 6 are climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, pollution, water biodiversity, and the transition to a circular economy. So circular economy really is by law integrated in both the taxonomy and those European sustainability reporting standards that are currently being developed by EFRAG. So the CSRD expanded the scope of the non-financial reporting directive, and almost 50,000 companies within Europe will be affected by the CSRD that is relying on those standards. So from our point of view, it's great to see that the circular economy is explicitly mentioned in those pieces of legislation. And going forward, companies will have to disclose on their circularity performance. And as said, going back to your questions, for now, it's roughly 50,000 companies, but there might be a spillover effect to other jurisdictions. I can tell more about that later.
Okay. Well, that's pretty big. And it's great that the Taxonomy and the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive talk to each other and talk about the same topics. And it's fantastic, of course, that circular economy is one of them. So what are then, outside of EU, these other frameworks that you briefly mentioned? Is there something else that you're actively looking into? What are these?
Yes, so I think from an Ellen MacArthur Foundation point of view, and you already mentioned it, we are a member of the Platform on Sustainable Finance, so that's working on the EU taxonomy. Europe is leading the pack really in terms of a non-financial reporting directive, but there are several other initiatives out there. I think first and foremost, there's the IFRS Foundation. They will be working on sustainability reporting, in first instance, focusing on climate change and financial materiality. But they already mentioned that they want to align that with the EU work that's happening and the standards developments as sort of a building block approach, as they call it. So that's one. Another one is the TNFD, which is building on the success of the TCFD, which is about climate-related financial disclosure, and the TNFD is about nature-related financial disclosure. Here, obviously, the circular economy has an important role to play, as we've shown in our recently published paper on biodiversity. So that would be another initiative we're focusing on. And then more broadly, we're seeing in this alphabet soup of different standard setters, reporting, non-financial reporting frameworks, to think about CDP, CDSB. From a foundation point of view, we really want to show to those initiatives and the harmonization efforts that are ongoing, show how the circular economy is going to be a crucial part of either addressing climate change, loss of biodiversity, plastic pollution. And as a result, tracking your circularity performance will inform that decision-making that those frameworks are working towards. So I think in a nutshell, to get back to your question, there's the EU, there's the IFRS Foundation, TNFD, and then a range of other initiatives that are currently ongoing.
Okay. But it sounds like you and we, the foundation, are focusing on some of the leading initiatives in terms of mandatory reporting and the harmonization efforts and trying to make sure that circular economy is represented there and that's also represented in a harmonized way.
Yes,
that's great.
And I think for good reason on our side. So if you're a company, especially looking at the mandatory reporting frameworks and just for your information, the EU obviously is for the European Union with a potential spillover effect, but IFRS Foundation is affecting jurisdictions globally. Well, first of all, tracking your circularity performance through Circulytics will help you getting ahead of the game, will help you anticipate those changes that will be mandatory, so they are coming your way. And actually it is happening in 2022. There will already be a limited disclosure in line with the taxonomy, which then will be ramped up over the coming years. So that's one angle, but I think equally important, it is about getting a competitive angle. Initiatives like the EU taxonomy are showing direction, are showing where we're heading towards. If you then see that circular economy is one of the 6 environmental objectives, so that disclosure in line with circular economy on circularity performance is going to be where we're heading towards. So if you start tracking that performance right now, regardless of the mandatory obligations that you will have, there is that element of better understanding your business and getting that competitive angle.
Okay. I think that's actually a very good place to end this conversation and go back to the studio, so to speak. So it's about getting ahead of the game in terms of mandatory reporting, but it's not just the tick box exercise, it's also finding competitive sort of edge through circular economy as the world and I guess EU in the first instance moves more towards a circular way of doing business and rebuilding our economy. So thank you, Michiel, for that.
Thank you. Great summary, and it was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Jarkko and Michiel. It's always important for businesses to really pull back and consider what's coming down the road. And that conversation really brought to life that broader context of why we're seeing such growth in circular economy measurement. But there are also other benefits that we haven't touched on yet that companies are gleaning from using circular economy measurement tools like Circulytics. So let's hear from some of those people that are using the tool.
Circular economy is really key to our business strategy and our direction. It will be crucial for our growth going forward. And I would also say that our circular economy agenda is really also a way for us to both engage with, inspire, and meet our customers. And also really adding on to what you just said on circular economy will be one of the most important tools that we have to actually reach our climate goals, for example, our biodiversity agenda. So circular economy is key. And at the H&M Group, we have a vision to become fully circular, and we have a long-term target to become climate positive in our full value chain by 2040. And of course, to be able to reach those visions and goals on a more broader level, we need to measure progress and how we're getting there. So measurement is key. What gets measured gets done, right?
Well, so the fact that the score is simple, right? You get a grade like when you were in school, and that grade communicates, to you. You have an emotional reaction when you see it. Is that score good? Are you happy with it? Or is it not that great? And you need to find more energy and momentum to improve. So one of the things that we're doing is actually taking our score internally around to all the various teams who are responsible for helping us accelerate our progress towards a circular economy. So sharing that information internally, bringing more awareness to where we're doing well and where we need to continue to improve, and then leveraging that momentum to accelerate. So we're on a bit of a roadshow with it internally to make sure everyone is aware and they understand the focus.
So we use this version 2 of Circulytics really as a pilot within the H&M Group to see both, of course, to engage with the wider organization. So we had a collaborative network of representatives from our different brands and functions helping out to gather the data. And that was good, of course, both from an awareness raising perspective, getting the focus on these key metrics and this data. But I also would like to say that I think Circulytics and circular economy targets in particular is a really good way for us to see, to prioritize what's important, to see and identify how are we doing, what kind of gaps do we see, and I think this assessment has been really good in that sense. Where do we need to speed up and accelerate? And data gathering is absolutely one of those areas, but also, of course, more topic-specific areas as well, where it could actually inform our future target setting and strategy making as well. So it's been very useful, but really much a learning journey so far.
So the first thing I would say, first and foremost, what Circulytics has been confirming is what we were hoping in silence, is that we do operate a circular business model. So that was bringing a name onto this pooling, share and reuse model that we were operating. More strategically, Circulytics, as similar to H&M and Cecilia, what Cecilia was saying, is what it has brought to us is a prioritization approach. Is we took the assessment 3 times. We're also beta testers, part of the sounding board, and by doing that, we've actually obtained 3 times a refreshed 360-degree picture across all of activities, and this has allowed us to better judge areas where we needed to dedicate time, people, and energy first, and then for the rest we could just continue as we were. It has also enabled us to consciously, I would say, capitalize on the strengths that we've been identifying. One of them is the robustness of our reporting system and the strength of our circular design on products and services that is nearly to 100% recirculation rate. So I would say, once we've said that, Circulytics has also been an incubator of our 2025 strategy before we've launched it. We've been able to test our plans, fine-tune certain of our tactics, especially on materials, and namely wood with reforestation, and upcycling, and energy with renewable energy, including Scope 3. And finally, from an insight perspective, the new version of Circulytics that we took recently has uncovered two opportunities where we could contribute and do more. One is water. Not to say that we didn't have a strategy on water, but our materiality study had not highlighted the inherent opportunities we had to get more impact. And clearly, when we know how important water is with biodiversity, once we would have tackled greenhouse gas emissions, it's really, every effort will count on this land. And the last opportunity that it highlighted has been property, plant, and equipment assets. Whereas we had a reporting base that is already robust and comprehensive, we could actually go beyond by linking this to our procurement tracking and measure inherently its circularity. So those are interesting challenges to come.
We are in every business. We are in the food business, in fashion, in cars, in health and consumer care, in electronics. Therefore, it was very important for us to have a measurement system that takes this unique position into account in the design phase, in the loop closing that we are doing very much, in our sourcing, and in our outcomes. So for us, Circulytics has been a framework that helps us to structure our ambition by category: sourcing, design of our own circularity, our products and our manufacturing processes, and the design of solutions, products, services, processes, enabling the circularity of our customers. And Circulytics is also going to be used very much to engage with our customers. It's also a way to structure our ambition in manufacturing more traditionally: energy, water, waste, and to define, as you said, our key performance indicators. So thanks to this tool, co-created with the network, it brought to Solvay a deep analysis of all the indicators to be taken into account holistically. And it helps Solvay to prioritize these indicators and to define, as you said, Eleanor, the first target, which is a flagship indicator included in our Solvay strategy for sustainability, or Solvay One Planet ambition. And we have defined the point to reach 15% of our turnover based on circular sourced products. And it has been voluntarily very selective in order to have a clear target as a start, but Circulytics was the guideline for that.
Absolutely, and that's something we've started the discussions recently with doing that, because we've been part of Circulytics in the development. That's a development partner. We've recently applied it. We've now got our scorecard. We can see where we need to improve. One of those aspects in terms of reaching out to our supply chain and hosting events and trying to empower and upskill our suppliers and our clients. And it's not always the first thing clients ask for, because it's still a language people are coming to terms with. And like we started at the beginning, net zero is an immediate concern for a lot of our clients. So almost the conversation, the narrative sits more naturally with the net zero type of conversation, which will then lend itself into the circular economy bigger picture.
Last year, when we completed our submission, it was based around the conversations that we were having with our suppliers involving the topic of circular economy. These were ad hoc, there was no structure to them, and there was no concise approach about how we approach the topic of circular procurement. This year, not only have we launched our now and next sustainability strategy that continues to put this at the heart of what we do, But the principle of the circular economy, it's exciting, but it's relatively new to us as well. And we're now starting to have those discussions with our suppliers. We introduced the Circulytics tool to our strategic supply partners, and we asked a number of them to complete the assessment themselves. And this now gives us a platform to put some structure behind those improvements in Circulytics. It enables us to develop a clear strategy with our suppliers around how we can improve our joint contribution to the circular economy.
So, as you just saw, Circulytics is a great way to set and strive for internal targets, or to engage external stakeholders, or prioritise actions. So we're moving on to the updates that we've made to Circulytics for the latest version. As we mentioned earlier today, we've just launched the latest update of Circulytics, ready for the next reporting cycle. One of the biggest changes is that we now map the Circulytics indicators to the Sustainable Development Goals. Julia, I'd like to bring you in to talk about why we felt that this was a valuable addition to add.
Yeah, so we know that companies are already setting SDG targets in their companies and climate targets. So having that connection between Circulytics and the circular economy to the SDGs can really help them achieve those targets. We know that the transition to a circular economy is really key in tackling climate change, because just looking at the renewable energy and the emission that we can tackle with energy is only addressing half of the story. We also need to look into how we make and use products and foods. And we do that by eliminating waste and pollution, by circulating products and materials to keep them in use, and regenerating natural systems. And companies today are already realising that. They are using many of these circular economy solutions to realise and to meet their climate change and SDG targets. So the Circulytics indicators have been mapped to the Sustainable Development Goals to make that easier for companies to make the connection between the circular economy tools that they might already be using or they could be using to achieve those targets. And because there is a very strong overlap actually between the Circulytics indicators and some of the SDG goals, we found that that would probably highlight very useful things for the company so they can pick from the tools that they have in their toolbox and address the targets that they have.
So it's important to really draw those links between circular economy and those global challenges that it helps to tackle, but how does Circulytics make those links?
So very hands-on. From this reporting cycle onwards, we will have a second page to the scorecard that we send out to companies with their result. And this second page has a mapping table on it where the Sustainable Development Goals actually have targets sat within them that define them. And we have mapped those Sustainable Development Goal targets to the Circulytics indicators. And for example, there are targets within the SDGs that refer to sustainable management of natural resources or food systems. And that maps really neatly to the Circulytics indicators where we ask about material inflows from sustainable or even better regenerative production systems. So that is one example, but there are many more where the two overlap. So in this table that we send out to the companies, we will color code the performance on each of the Circulytics indicators that has been mapped to an SDG target. And just from that, the company can see really easily where there are perhaps levers that they can employ more or use more in their journey to meet their SDG targets.
So are there any other frameworks as well that Circulytics is linked to? What else could it be helpful for?
Yeah, there's one I would like to highlight here, and that's the Foundation's New Plastics Economy Global Commitment. The global commitment has been signed by more than 500 organisations, so that includes businesses but also policymakers, and they pledge to create a circular economy for plastics in which it never becomes waste. And together, the companies in the global commitment represent 20% of all plastic packaging produced globally, so that is quite a lion's share. And they include well-known brands such as L'Oreal, Mars, Unilever, Nestlé, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, you name them. And we map the global commitment to Circulytics in order to make that connection and make the link clear for companies. And also because we believe that Circulytics can help global commitment companies achieve their targets there, because Circulytics applies this broader lens where we look at the enabling conditions that can help you achieve your circular outcomes, like the plastic flows that you have in the company.
So there's some overlap, but it almost as well goes a bit further or measures more than just that overlap.
Yeah.
And what about the questions themselves? Have there been any changes to the indicators within Circulytics?
So the indicators themselves remained largely consistent between the version, and that is also the goal, to allow companies to track their progress year on year. One of the updates that we have included this year is about restructuring the assessment slightly. So to make it really clear in the flow of the questions where the company makes a decision that will impact the flow further on. So basically, we now have 3 sections to Circulytics. In the first section, the company will scope the assessment. So you would respond to a set of company characteristics. That is, for example, does the company deal with materials? Does the company have services, or both maybe? Depending on that, the assessment later on would look different. So that's the scoping part. Then in the second part of the assessment, the company would respond to, for example, sizes of certain things. That helps us to really put the importance on the right scoring indicators later on. So for example, there is a theme on plant property equipment assets in Circulytics. And we don't want the companies to get lost in the paperwork and look at the last 3 employee uniforms that they have when it's a big business. We want them to focus on the asset groups that are really material to the business. So we allow the reporter in this second section to kind of give us the size of the asset groups, and later on that will be taken into account in the assessment.
So the first, am I right that the first section is almost what's going to be asked? The second is the weighting?
Yeah. That's exactly right, yeah. And then in the third and final section, that is the indicators as we know them from Circulytics, the Circulytics scoring indicators. They have mainly remained consistent. And yeah, with those, by the time the company reporter gets to that third section, they are really tailored to the company, and they will only see what's relevant to them.
Mm-hmm. So given that the assessment is so comprehensive, it sounds like for a large company especially, it's going to take a lot of data collection. Are there any updates in terms of easing that process?
Yeah, we had feedback from companies that have completed Circulytics before that they were usually going, once they've signed up to Circulytics and they needed to upload the data to the online platform, there was that step in between where you obviously need to gather the data from different sources in the company. And for that, most companies would refer to the same resource, and that is a simple spreadsheet. So every company would need that spreadsheet to gather the data. And we are now providing a template for that. So we have created a comprehensive template that covers all the Circulytics indicators, all the pre-assessment stages that we send out together with the account login details to the reporter. And that should really facilitate that data collection process, because it allows you to pull in colleagues from within the company or people up the value chain, or even customers if that is needed, and really gather the data in one place.
Okay, so we've had SDG mapping, improvements to the user journey, as well as to the data collection process. Is there anything else that's been updated in this latest version?
So perhaps not an update, but worth mentioning is that we're obviously a global organisation, and our focus is really to get Circulytics taken up globally as well. So as in the previous versions, we will be offering the languages, we will offer Circulytics in Mandarin, in Portuguese and in Spanish, as well as in English. So just to make it easier for companies in those areas to really also respond to the indicators. The recent content changes to the tool include adding a theme on water, so that was already included last reporting cycle, but just worth mentioning perhaps for those companies that skipped a year, and there's a theme on water. And then we also went back to the themes that were already in the tool and looked at how can we improve those. So that's what over the last year, we looked into those themes and we made some improvements, for example, to the innovation theme as well, where previously we perhaps only asked, how are you implementing the innovation function to gear them towards circular economy. We are now going into a lot more detail. We have fleshed out that theme and really give a very descriptive and prescriptive way for the company to work towards their innovation function to be set up for success, really.
Great, thank you, Julia. We still have some time for some questions we've had from the audience. My first question is about that scorecard that we ran through earlier. You talked that some companies get a commentary with the scorecard. Does that commentary provide specific examples of what a company could implement to improve?
So we go into as much detail as we can in that commentary. We would look into all the supporting evidence that the company provides along with their submission. So for each of the indicators, we look at the context for it and really try to understand where the levers are, and we will pull out that information and describe that. Obviously, we can't go to the extent that we help the companies one-on-one implement that change, but we will be as descriptive as we can in the commentary.
So another question is about how has it been used for got some examples of different types of companies. So, for example, by a startup compared to maybe by a hospital.
Yeah, so in that pre-assessment, as mentioned, it will be tailored to whatever the specific company setup is. A startup will, it depends really what industry they are in, what they're using.
So there's no difference depending on, say, the revenue, the size of the company, it doesn't change the assessment?
The revenue wouldn't change the assessment, no. Mm-hmm. It's more about which themes are relevant to the company.
And would that be the industry and what else other than the industry would depend?
So it's a combination of the company characteristics that includes, for example, the industry. The industry plays into it where, for example, an energy provider would see an indicator on energy production, whereas a financial institution would see questions on how they allocate their investments, or a normal manufacturing company would see product and materials as their core assessment theme.
So it almost can it work for any company?
Yeah, that's what we see in the completions, that it really is tailored to the company and it should work for all industries.
And what about but it can't be used for something that's not a company. So say you were looking at measuring the circular economy performance of a marine port and kind of a whole system of companies. That's not where this is applicable.
So Circulytics was really developed to look at the company as a whole. We don't usually look at project-based assessments because some of the indicators or themes look at, for example, the strategy. But we nevertheless, all the indicators are publicly available on our website, and we very much encourage companies to draw inspiration from that, have a look at the indicators and really, see what applies to their project if that is what they're trying to assess.
So slightly different, moving on from that, how long does it actually take to get the scorecard from this process? So sort of what happens between a company submitting and then getting back the scorecard?
So maybe it's starting even before that. So the data collection process takes a little bit between maybe a few weeks and even 2-3 months, depending on how complex it is for the company to gather that data. And we see that it will become easier the second time around once the company has really understood where they can find the data in their company. And then once the data has been submitted, the module processes it instantly. That's a hands-off process. It's an automatic calculation that takes place. And then we look at the scorecard and we'll reach out if needed. And we try to understand that the data points are as valid as we can from the position we're in. And then
it's about human judgment in creating the score, but it's just,
That's a model that runs through.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then once that score has been generated and the scorecard has been produced, the commentary has been written, that is usually after 2 or 3 weeks within the submission, we will send out the scorecard.
So how there's lots of, we saw that there's different enabler themes. Does it look at kind of your own employees and what you're doing internally in that perspective? I think you mentioned quite a few times external engagement, but how does it look internally as well?
Yeah, there's a whole theme on people and skills. So it is very much also looking internally and how employees are educated, how the knowledge is created within the company. That could be what functions are working on something circular economy related in their role description, or in that. It is also looking at how are the communication channels set up in the company, and also what kind of courses are offered on circular economy. Are those courses mandatory, and which parts of the organisation get to do them?
So how about the actual score that a company receives? How do we ensure that remains confidential, and what's the sort of process if a company then does want to disclose their score?
So we have set up a secure cloud-based model for this. So it's all processed on that. We're not sharing the data. So EMF won't share the data or publicly disclose individual company data. The only way we use the data is to form these aggregated benchmarks that you've seen on the scorecard, for example, or statistical analysis, but we wouldn't disclose individual scores. So the only person to receive the result directly from us is the company reporter that signed up and put in the data originally. And then if a company chooses to disclose, which we very much encourage, we explain the whole process also in the materials we send out along with the scorecard. But essentially, before the first disclosure is made, we ask the company to get in touch with us to just check over the sentences and just to make sure that everything's correct.
We've had another question, who is analysing the data? So you sort of mentioned that the model does that scoring process, but then is it the case that there is someone kind of looking at that data?
So yeah, there is a human element involved after the score is generated, and we just sense check essentially the responses and the supporting evidence that is all consistent, and the question hasn't been misinterpreted, for example. But the score itself, we've put the model in place that was developed together with our network. The way things are scored and weighted, that is all automatic by now.
Great, thank you. I think we're coming to the end of our webinar, so thank you, Julia, for answering all of our questions today. And for all of you for participating and asking questions as well. If you have any further questions, then you can definitely email us at circulytics@emf.org, or most importantly, if you would like to sign up to get a Circulytics account, you can do so at circulytics.com. We are looking forward to supporting everyone on their journey to becoming more circular. Thank you.